Hi, I'm Metro New York Synod Vice President Renée Wicklund, and I went to a Catholic high school. My high school had relatively few students who weren't Roman Catholic. It wasn't a big deal, though. Everyone knew I was a Lutheran, but my friends still invited me to Mass. I went. I joined the Catholic Youth Organization to play sports, and every semester when we had confession in the gymnasium, I made an appointment and went. Not actually to confess anything, but just to talk shop with the priest, and it was fine. One class that was required for us to take every semester was called Knowledge of Christian Doctrine, or KCD. Sophomore year, my KCD class was taught by a Franciscan friar, whom I'll call Father F. One day, after a class discussion on eternity, I gave my best attempt at explaining why time might be something that's important to mortals, but irrelevant to the heavenly kingdom. And I guess that explanation went over well, because later, as the other students left, Father F pulled me aside and he said, "Renée, you have a talent for explaining and analyzing challenging subject matter. Have you ever considered becoming a minister?" His words made me really happy because I was considering that vocation. So I told Father F that indeed I was thinking about ordained ministry, and I thanked him for the compliment. But later I looked back on that moment just a little bit differently. If you think about it, here was a Franciscan friar encouraging me, a young woman, to consider pursuing ministry. And what's more, he was offering an opinion that I possessed a talent that might make me especially suited to ministry. And yet Roman Catholic doctrine held then, and still holds today, that only men can be ordained as bishops or priests or deacons. In fact, 6 years after that conversation with Father F in 1994, Pope John Paul II wrote, and I'll read this, he wrote that the Church has no authority whatsoever to confer priestly ordination on women, and that this judgment is to be definitively held by all the Church's faithful. So to be Roman Catholic at all, he said, one must accept that women are unsuited to ordination. Which means I have to think that if Father F had seen the same ability to analyze and explain challenging subject matter in any of my classmates, my female classmates who were Roman Catholics, he would have kept silent or found some reason to believe that she was unsuited to ordained ministry. But that seems like quite a conundrum. Why would our Creator, in the opinion of Father F, confer a talent for ministry upon a female if the Church on earth forbids her ordination? That just seems like a waste. Back in high school, actually, I hadn't even thought much about the Roman Catholic Church's prohibition on women in ordained ministry, or about the similar policies within Eastern Orthodoxy and many Protestant denominations, in the denomination of my baptism, the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod, or even in our own ELCA until 50 years ago. My experience by high school was of a Lutheranism that allowed women to live out their faith by serving the Church universal in any role to which they felt called. As I contemplated my own future, I thought long and hard about ordination, with no more than a gut feeling that it would be sort of silly if my sex alone were to preclude me from that vocation. I mean, even a Franciscan friar thought I would be good at it, so what could be the problem? In college, I became more involved at living out my Lutheran faith through Lutheran Campus Ministry, which was a joint venture then of the ELCA and the Lutheran Church Missouri Synod. But it wasn't until graduate school, where I studied theology and the history of Christianity, that I really began to grapple with the role of women in God's church, historically, scripturally, and theologically. I undertook a more serious examination of the barriers that have stood between women and ordination, so that I would be able to defend my gut feeling that the Christian church should not limit Christians' ability to serve. The question of women's role in the church, of course, is not a simple one. St. Paul seemed to waver on the issue. He admonished women to keep silent in church, and he recognized men as the exclusive leaders. On the other hand, he also commended our sister Phoebe, a deacon in the church. Of course, Paul was a worthy servant, but he wasn't the Christ. He was a man building the Christ's church within the constraints of a particular culture and society. Indeed, the history of the church cannot be divorced from the trends and opinions of mortals who are fallible and acting on a temporary basis until the Christ returns. If we look to the Christ, the infallible, we see that Jesus trusted Mary Magdalene, who had traveled with him and witnessed the crucifixion, as the servant to convey the news of his resurrection, the very foundation of our church. How then could Mary be denied any role within the church? The fulfillment of my Christian identity would not be possible apart from a denomination that recognizes women's gifts and service in the full range of responsibilities. In the end, I did not pursue ordination. God called me to lead in lay leadership instead. I'm grateful for the circumstances that encouraged me to consider all options when discerning my place. And to be honest, I grieve for my female friends and classmates who were never permitted to see themselves as worthy of ordination in the church. In Proverbs 31, we read, "She considers a field and buys it. With the fruit of her hands, she plants a vineyard. She dresses herself with strength and makes her arms strong." May the strength and the conviction of Lutheran women inspire us and sustain us. Let's have a great celebration of women's history.